Hey everybody, welcome to the very first episode of my new Substack video series. Seen enough to know better, but still figuring it out. Normally I'd write these things out, but I just haven't had a lot of time to do that. And I wanted to do this because the world keeps giving me things to think about. And I've learned that if I don't say them out loud, or write them down, they kind of just chase me around anyway. I realize video is a new medium for me. I have the perfect face for radio and spend a lot of time on the radio, but I'm going to try this little video thing out and see how it goes. And I'm going to try to talk to you from wherever I am in the world. Today, I happen to be in West Michigan, and it's a beautiful fall day here. I saw a quote the other day that kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it said, "History doesn't repeat itself, it rehearses until we recognize the pattern and reject the role." Let that sink in a minute. History doesn't repeat itself, it rehearses over and over and over again. And I thought about that because I was on my way home from Amsterdam and the Anne Frank house I had visited. And then I landed at O'Hare in Chicago, my favorite big city in the US and where I spent many years of my life, only to see kind of the chaos and the heartbreak of everything that's going on there right now. And it made me start thinking about how many times we've rehearsed these scenes that we're seeing play over again, where humanity keeps running the same plays and calling it progress. So come with me quickly for a history lesson. We're going to do about 3,000 years in a few minutes, no pop quiz at the end. We're going to start in 13th century BCE in Egypt, right? Where Pharaoh is looking out over Egypt and he panics and he says, "The Israelites are multiplying too fast. There's too many of them. They've gotten too strong. I have to do something. What if they come for us? What if there's too many? What if? And his solution wasn't diplomacy or policy, it was genocide. "Kill all the baby boys," he ordered, and we heard that in Exodus chapter 1. The story was so epic that they made a blockbuster out of it. Charlton Heston got a great role. Moses is up on a mountain. He comes down with some tablets, 10 rules of the road, and the greatest exit scene in history. And then 1,000 years later, Herod, Rome's hand-picked king of Judea, gave us a sequel we didn't ask for when 3 wise men arrive in Jerusalem carrying some gifts, skincare, aromatherapy, some cash, announcing a newborn king of the Jews. And Herod says, "Well, let me know where he is. I want to meet him," right? We all know this story because it's why Joseph and Mary skipped town in the first place. After the wise men vanished and Herod started doing Herod kind of things, Joseph has a dream and it says, "Get up, take the child and run," and take his mother and run. And so he did. Off to Egypt they go. History's most famous brown-skinned refugee family, hoping someone would help them. And if the story ended there, we might call it progress, right? I mean, the tyrant dies, the family survives, becomes the most revered immigrant story in history. But it didn't. A millennium later, new empire, same fear. This time it's draped in robes and swinging incense, the Spanish Inquisition. In 1478, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, you know the ones, they were the dynamic duo that actually financed Christopher Columbus to discover lands already full of people. Well, they launched the Spanish Inquisition to protect Christianity after centuries, literally centuries of Christians and Muslim and Jews getting along. But they wanted to protect it. What they really wanted to do is purify it, right? Converts were dragged before tribunals, tortured until they confessed, burned in public squares, all the while the choirs are singing. But look closer. It really wasn't about belief. It was about assimilation. The Inquisition demanded sameness under the guise of holiness. And you might say, some might say, that today's Christian nationalism kind of runs on that same anxiety that faith, identity, or the nation is being diluted by outsiders' secularism or diversity. By 1880s, setting had changed, but the script hadn't. There's a young United States, and you may remember from 8th grade history, I do, Mrs. Imke taught me, manifest destiny. The divine right to expand westward, no matter who was already living there, which seemed like a great idea, unless, of course, you were already living there. And that became the Trail of Tears, or the Indian Removal Act of 1830. It was driven by greed. White settlers and politicians wanted indigenous lands, resources, they wanted the control. But greed really, rarely stands alone. You know, it's almost, if you think about it, it's almost always hides behind fear or insecurity or fear that someone else's presence or their culture or success threatens your own place in the story. So yeah, it was greed for the land, But greed gave itself moral permission by claiming they're different. They don't do it right. They stand in the way of progress. Andrew Jackson and Congress back then didn't just want the territory, they wanted to justify taking it. And fear is how they sold it to the public. And then in the 1930s, fear moved on and had discovered the power of the press, right? Pharaoh had soldiers, Herod had swords, Stalin and Hitler, newspapers, radios, microphones. But both understood something chillingly modern that we can still see today. If you control the story, you can control the soul. In Soviet Union, neighbors were reporting neighbors. Writers and artists who didn't really follow the party line were getting thrown into gulags. They had a newspaper called Pravda, Truth, and it printed lies until truth itself kind of really became suspect. And then across Europe, of course, I mean, we don't need to remind ourselves about Hitler. He had the same playbook as Stalin, only he had a logo in the swastika. And it wasn't just a stage show, it was about killing people. But it wasn't just about that. What Hitler did that is so disturbing, that scares me to my core, is that he didn't just kill people, he convinced the world that they deserved it. And by the time the trains rolled towards Auschwitz, the extermination wasn't just physical, it was psychological. An entire population had been rehearsed to believe that cruelty was duty. And then 1940s, we had Pearl Harbor, and, probably the most patriotic version of fear-mongering yet was the Executive Order 9066, when 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of them who were American citizens, were moved to relocation centers, which just is a fancy word for camps. Families lost their homes, their farms, their dignity, everything but their citizenship, which honestly didn't count for much at that moment anyway. Lawmakers said, oh no, we need it for our security. Neighbors said, oh, it's necessary to move them there. It was neither. It was just fear rehearsing the same script with new actors. And then we saw it in the 1950s with McCarthy. Same thing. People were blacklisted not for what they did, but for what they believed or who they knew. And now here we are, right? The present tense of this history's rehearsal. Different century, same script. In Hungary, we've seen Viktor Orban perfecting the politics of purity, wrapping authoritarianism in Christian values. And here at home, some might say this current administration is doing the same. A gospel of grievances baptized in nationalism. Immigrants become invaders, opinions become facts, propaganda moved from the printing press to the social media algorithms of the day. But the slogans are new, but honestly, the theology is ancient. And it's pretty simple. It's simple if you look at all of those examples in history. It's we, whoever the we is, are chosen. They are dangerous. And that's the single thread that kind of runs through all of it, right? Every example I just said, it's the us versus them story. The oldest story we tell, and quite frankly, the easiest one to believe when we're made to be afraid. Pharaoh called them foreigners, Herod called them threats, the Inquisitors called them heretics, the settlers called them savages, Hitler called them inferior, we just call them illegal or un-American. It's tribalism. But when you think about tribalism isn't evil by design, it's just human. It's what happens when we put on our favorite football jersey or baseball jersey of our favorite team. But it can become evil when belonging turns defensive and when the need to feel special hardens into the need to be superior. Let me say it again. When the need to feel special hardens into the need to feel or be superior. Every act of cruelty that we've rehearsed throughout history starts in that small private moment of insecurity. The whisper that says, if they win, I lose. And I've said for many years, insecurity is the root of all evil. I always try to approach when people do things that I shake my head over or wonder how they behaved or why they behaved like that. I always look at them and think, give them the benefit of the doubt. My mom used to say, darling, they must have something missing in their life. In my head, in my world, it's what are they insecure about? Because usually when people do something questionable, they're insecure about something. Even me, when I've misbehaved or done things I wasn't proud of in my life, it's because I was insecure about something. And insecurity is the root of all evil. It's why people get jealous or cruel or righteous. When you look at all of these stories, Pharaoh, Herod, Manifest Destiny, The Camps, The Walls, they all start in that spot. Human insecurity, the fear of losing something, power or purity or certainty. And every time we build some human-made illusion to protect it, religion, borders, race, flags, tribes, things we created to feel safe ended up really dividing us instead. So I started all of this off, and I'm almost done, I promise. But I started all of this off by saying history doesn't repeat itself, it rehearses until we recognize the pattern and reject the role. And lately, we've been hearing calls to reject the role. Even the biggest White Sox fan in Rome, Pope Leo, the one who keeps imploring kindness, mercy, and compassion towards migrants, keeps reminding us that faith isn't proven in who we keep out, but who we let in. He knows, and he's repeated several times, you've seen it in news stories, the Gospel of Matthew, right? For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was raised Catholic, and I appreciate the Pope's message. I really identify as a progressive Christian today, and I'm not really one for quoting the Bible, but oh, so many people do, and it just gets me. Every December, people set out nativity scenes, the manger, the star, the baby in swaddling clothing, and somehow forget that that story was a refugee story. Joseph and Mary weren't on a holiday trip. They were fleeing a government that wanted their child dead. They were crossing borders, country borders, to keep their families safe. They are the world's most famous immigrant couple. Brown-skinned, broke, pregnant, unmarried, scared, doing what every parent in every century has done, trying to protect their child and give them a better life. And it's hard to reconcile that story with the world we live in now, where some of the same people who sing Silent Night in December are cheering for families being ripped apart in Chicago, or laughing, or mocking. And they're doing all that while children are sleeping under foil blankets at the border. If we really believe the story we celebrate at Christmas, then we should remember it wasn't about power or borders or color. It was about mercy. A terrified family and strangers who helped them survive. So after all of this thinking and plotting and wondering, I come down to this. We can't control the script we inherited, but we can decide our part in it. To remember history, to find those parallels, to remember our faith, our heart, and what it means to be human, to stop cheering for cruelty just because it's louder than other voices, familiar, or because it's wrapped in a flag. The challenge isn't just to fight hate, it's to stay human in the face of it. So thanks for listening to Seen Enough to Know Better, but still figuring it out. The next episode will come to you from Darwin's laboratory in Ecuador, where I'm going to be looking for a beagle. No, wait, that's not right. But I'll be coming to you from the Galapagos Islands, where I'll find out once and for all if I've actually evolved. Later.